All right. Well, welcome KYR. Thank you all for showing up today to our second installment of What If I Say the Wrong Thing? I'm Lamont Breland, co-chair of the DEI committee. My leader, Elizabeth Monarch, could not be here today. She's in a training, I believe. So I'm going to try to bring the energy that she always brings and smile and be happy and just be crazy. But anyway, I want to also say that we've got a couple birthday people here, a couple birthday boys.
Yeah.
I think Justin Landon, it's his birthday today. And Norman Jones, I think yesterday was his 74th birthday. So we just want to say happy birthday to both you guys. Anybody else on here have a birthday today? Okay, Norm, wasn't 74. I'm just kidding.
Happy birthday. Sing to
you all. So anyway, I just want to let you know we are now covering the last time we met, we did chapters 1 through 13. Today we're doing 14 through 25. So without further ado, I will turn today's program over to our co-hosts, Raquel Cotter and the birthday boy, Justin Landon. Back to you guys.
Good deal, good deal. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I think last week we had great discussion about habits 1 through 13 as we continued on reading through 14 through 25. I think hopefully you guys agree it was just a lot of just real life experiences that we've probably been on either side of. So I do like the way the author was just really I guess not so academic and specific, or just real life experiences. So our hope today, and I'm speaking for Justin and myself, but is just to encourage conversation. And I think last time we got to about the end, right? And everybody had lots to share and join. So we just really want to start that way this time. I don't want to make it too structured. I want everyone just to feel comfortable and see in reading habits 14 through 25, which habit in particular maybe spoke to you, which one had either the biggest aha moment or maybe evoked the most emotion for you. And I think will be specific. I'll get us going, if you don't mind, I had a couple that I wrote down in particular. And today I felt a little bit, I don't know, anti-habits for, I had the opposite side of some of her points of view, which I found was interesting. And it might've just been, I was a little grumpy this morning because I'm doing that intermittent fasting. You guys do that. So no food in the morning. I was a little grumpy when I was rereading. But for example, in habit 7, I do agree, definitely. It's called, I know you haven't done this before. Don't be afraid to ask. And I do appreciate that completely. And I understand that is how people learn. I also understand that when people are asking from a positive place or a place of concern and curiosity, that is how they would learn diversity as well. But on the negative side of this, I'm just going to bring it out, right? So when you're the one down group, particularly if you find yourself being the only one often, you find you get a little annoyed by being the spokesperson. Yeah. So by being the one that everyone asks the question of, and there are questions that as a Black female I've had over time that I don't know that my white counterparts do, and maybe they don't, maybe they do. So maybe you guys can share. But questions related to hair or ethnicity, people will ask me often, what are you? Right? Like, what kind of question is that? Like, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, you guys, actually, I'm originally from Louisville, right? But that's not what they mean. But they feel okay to ask that question, and I can see both sides of it. So maybe I'll start a good discussion or debate with that. You should ask, but you might get on my nerves if you ask.
Well, and that dovetails with habit 21 a little bit, Raquel, that talks about, being proactive doesn't mean taking a second job, right? This idea that, but I think in many ways, as a white person, right, there should be an expectation on us that we need to learn a little bit before we start asking questions sometimes too, right? I mean, it's that placing that burden on our one down counterparts to bear the burden of educating everybody is unfair. I think, Habit 21 said, and it doesn't have to be a second job, but it, maybe a part-time job for a little while to educate yourself before you ask questions that you should be able to discover on your own.
Yeah, I agree.
Let me go back to something that Raquel was talking about. I had a client just very recently. I'm talking about in the last month, and my client was white, and we hadn't met, and we're sitting down meeting, and he's kind of doing an interview, and then he asked me that question. Now, where are you from? And I thought that was interesting, but I was also trying to think ahead to see where he was going, and where he was going was, do you know this area? So the assumption that I may not, as a Black person, know the area. And then I told him I grew up in Oldham County, and the room just went dead silent. And I said, after a while, he just said, he opened his mouth, sort of stunned. And I said, is there a problem? He said, I've never met a Black person from Oldham County before. I thought that was interesting. And he said, really? He said, when you graduated, from what school? I said, I graduated from Oldham County High School, because that was the only school, high school at that point. But he didn't know what to say at that point. And so I just gave him some historical background that before busing started and people started moving to Oldham County, that there happened to be people of color that already lived there. But then I've had the reverse, where I've had conversations, just a normal conversation with friends, and they were shocked, and because they assumed I was from West Louisville. So those are the type of things that we ask or we say sometimes that kind of throws everybody off. And it was on me at that point to make sure that I handled getting through that. We listed, we got sold and all that fun stuff, but I just thought that was interesting, even from a client standpoint, to be sitting there and having that conversation. But I felt it was important to have it at that point.
I agree.
Good.
Al, you got it.
Yeah. So, I'm thinking through those things, and, relationships and trust is so big in this. And then for us to learn, and back to an old 7 habits, seek first to understand, then be understood. But, my personal experience, and, some of you all are good friends of mine, and I feel comfortable enough to say some things that are maybe taken or step back, but the trust that we have, or the relationship that we have, we're able to get through it. It helps me learn, maybe helps someone else learn. So, just still, a lot of forgiveness, and a lot of just seeking to understand, and how else can we get better, and by doing this, I'm ready for the next book. And I did the At Home with Diversity all-day class with NAR the other day, and it was awesome. And the video, if you haven't seen it, about the color of law, which you probably have, but it was concise. And, when you read the book, you can get lost in some things. But that video, and one of our participants cried on the video because, she was just thinking about all that has passed by her and her family in the past. But it was just a trusting group of people, and a large number. But it was, if you haven't seen the video, watch the video too. I know you read the book.
Great. That's a great point, Al. And that seek first to understand, in the relationship piece of it, is exactly what makes the difference in that type of conversation, I do believe. I believe if you're having a conversation with someone that is a back and forth, a relational conversation, it is more comfortable to wade into that space of asking questions and being, being a little more frank where you may not always. So I guess it's like asking a woman how old she is, or you're waiting. You got to know them first. You need to know them first.
That's true.
But along those lines, one of the other habits that I outlined here was habit 20, and that was exactly that, about expanding your comfort zone in your professional and social circles. And I would say if there was one habit that I would call the most important in here, as far as something you can actually do, this one falls into that space for me. Because the thing that cures the lack of diversity is by you intentionally being in spaces where there are. And you have to do it in an intentional fashion, because it doesn't just happen. You just wake up with family that looks like you, and often are in spaces that look like you, just out of, just normal, comfortable spaces. But if you want to learn about different people, different nationalities, they don't always knock on your door. You have to make some efforts to get into those social and professional circles. So that's a good one for me. Justin, was that a good one for you? Did you have others?
Sorry, you think
No,
I'd use
getting
Zoom for the
old.
same? You think I'd use Zoom for the first time? Every time I use Zoom, it's like it's for the first time. So, Raquel, that 20 reminds me of a leadership program that we did a couple of years ago. I believe you were there. Actually, I know you were there. Al was our president at the time, and invited a woman from Georgetown College to come and do a diversity kind of presentation. And she did an exercise where she gave us a cup with two different sets of beads. And, she read off a list of people in your life, like your dentist, your best friend, your maid of honor, your best man, we just went through a list of people. And if they looked like you, you put one color of bead in your cup. And if they didn't look like you, you put a different color bead in your cup. And at the end of the exercise, how many colors are in your cup, and how often are you seeing a different color than the one that looks like you? And, as we looked around the room, right, it was an exercise that was very eye-opening for people, realizing how narrow their circles are. Particularly folks who maybe haven't moved across different parts of the country and have, largely been in this example, in Kentucky most of their lives, that their social circles are incredibly narrow. And that's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's just natural, but it also, I think, to your point, was really just a visual representation. If we don't make an effort to expand those circles, they just won't. It's just a feedback loop. Well, I think the thing that struck me most about the second half of this book in general, and it was probably in the first half too, but the second half struck me most about, there's an aspect of tolerance to a lot of these habits at the end of saying that, especially habit 18, which I think, race is such a thing that we're all talking about and very aware of, but still many of us are still really adapting to concepts of gender fluidity. And so, 18 was very much about understanding that we will make mistakes, how we accept criticism when we make mistakes, right? To say, not to be defensive, but to say, like, yeah, boy, I screwed that one up, and then ask people to hold you accountable when you screw up again, because we will, right? I mean, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. And 18 just really struck with me. I think the title was "Girl, I Mean Boy, I Mean, You Know What I Mean." I took a lot away from that one.
And Justin, it seems like with that one, the other, what was it, 15, kind of dovetail in some ways, because it's talking about making space for differences within yourself, and not just taking it and shutting down, but actually understanding that we don't all know it all. And so that when somebody gives us ideas, thoughts, suggestions, that maybe it's okay to at least look at them and look at it a different way, and think about how they're seeing or feeling or living, as opposed to what we thought was always right.
Yeah, Justin, I was out to lunch yesterday at a sit-down little cafe, and the waitress came up and she said something to me, and I said, "No, ma'am." And I don't even know really why I did it. But then the person after she left, the person I was with joked, she said, "Yeah, she probably ran back to the bathroom and is crying." And they kind of laughed. I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "You just called her a sir." And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, maybe did I?" So then every time she came back to the table, I was like paralyzed. I was afraid to say anything because I mean, she wasn't, I don't know how to put this, but I'll just say she wasn't overly feminine. So, I mean, I guess that, I don't know, that may be horrible to say, but I just said it. But I mean, so maybe my subconscious was confused for a minute, but I found myself thinking about this book immediately. And then I was kind of paralyzed and wasn't quite sure. I didn't want to mess up again. So I just said, I didn't say much. Let's just say that. So
I had that experience at a Starbucks. The person came on the line and said, "This is Miles. How can I help you?" But it had a very high pitched voice, and so thoughtlessly I said, "Thank you." When I left, I said, "Thank you, ma'am." And actually, when I got up to the window, I said, "I don't know, but I would like to apologize if I misgendered you." Right? Like I apologize. I really fretted for the entire car line about whether or not to apologize or not, and did. And the person was very kind of shocked by my apology. But it was, again, a moment where I felt like to just ignore it was not the right thing to do either. So that's another part about Habit 18 that I really enjoyed, was this idea that sometimes making the effort of intentionally seeing somebody, the reaction of the woman when her friend sort of acknowledged that her transition, and how or I guess it was how he had transitioned to a man, how his friend had commented on how good he looked, right? And how and that just acknowledging that change, which many of us, I think, by default would choose to ignore and sort of just move on to the new gender, but not to acknowledge the change, that by acknowledging the change, he felt actually quite seen, in the same way that we sort of say, like, "Oh, I don't see color," right? Well, no, actually observing that change makes somebody feel much more accepted and recognized and seen.
I think one thing I want to say is that has happened to me a lot because my voice is somewhat deeper, and sometimes people think I'm a man. And it's like the author said, mistakes are going to happen. I don't get upset. And then the reverse happens with my husband, because he's a high tenor and sometimes thinks he's a female if we're, just talking to each other on the phone. So, I mean, we do want to be respectful, but sometimes if we overanalyze it, it can make things harder. Most people, I think, are pretty open. It's just, the main thing is just to communicate and keep moving.
point.
Well, I've got a question, and maybe somebody can answer this. When a person transitions, is a transgender, and transitions from a male to a female, now my eyes, this is a she, because she has become a she, or he has become a she, and vice versa. So, yeah, and sometimes, like Justin said, when you're talking to them, the voices have not changed, because I guess the hormones take a little while to really start kicking in, and I don't know. So it's easy sometimes to, if you're just talking to them, actually to make the mistake. Whereas if you saw them in person, you would realize really fast. So with that said, and so, it is difficult sometimes to decide, do I apologize or what? But then, you're right, Justin and Cheryl, hey, we need to apologize and say, hey, I'm sorry, I just, didn't realize.
Yeah, I agree, Brenda. I'm sorry is usually sufficient. Sometimes we keep talking and we get it all, we get it worse, trying to explain or not, just like, oh, I'm sorry. And I feel like, back to what we were talking about and asking the questions, if you are in a coming from a genuine place with someone that you know and you're comfortable with, then maybe you do ask, how do you prefer that I refer to you? And then that way you don't have to guess or assume things that we don't know. But
It's interesting. Emmanuel Acho, I don't know how many of you know who that is. He hosted The Bachelor after Chris got kicked off for maybe for good. It's not clear whether he's coming back or not. But Emmanuel Acho, he's a football announcer, former NFL player, but has written some really amazing books about race and equity and things like that. And he made a comment just about the terms. He was speaking at the Association Executives Institute, and I see Linda came on. Hi, Linda. I don't know if you saw his presentation at AEI, but his presentation was very much about even the term Black versus African American, that he actually very much appreciated it when people would ask him how he preferred to be referred to as, and that's something that I think often we don't ask those questions, and I think it's important to do so.
Good point. I like the idea of just, I don't know which one it was, but it was kind of deflecting with humor. I mean, I guess you got to be careful with that sometimes, but I mean, if you make a mistake, just kind of own up to it and just say, I'm a doofus, or whatever, and just say, I'm trying to get better. But, trying to, even in the chapter where it says, if you see something, say something, to not say anything is kind of condoning what someone says it, but there are ways to confront it if someone, a coworker or something, says something a little off color, but to kind of deflect it with humor, but not make them feel like a bad person, but at least acknowledge it publicly that, what do you mean by that? That kind of thing, and just kind of get the conversation going in a way is to try to correct it.
great, that's a good one. Habit 16. Aren't you scared to live there? If you see something, say something. That's what Lamont was referencing. And in that particular habit, it talks about how culturally ineffective it is to just be a passive bystander. When someone says something inappropriate or uncomfortable, for you not to speak up or you to leave the situation or change the subject. And I feel like that's a space that most of us have been in at some time or another. Does anyone have an idea or a story they'd like to share in that space? There you are, Mike.
So it's funny that I actually get that quite a bit because I live off of Taylor Boulevard, and I joke about it. I live in the hood, and I've been there for about 26 years. And if I tell people I live off of Southern Parkway, they're like, oh, there's some really nice houses over there. But if I tell people I live off Taylor Boulevard, they're like, oh. And I'm like, and I've had people say, aren't you scared to live over there? Aren't you worried about being there? And it really pisses me off. I'm like, there's good and bad people everywhere. If you watch the news, people are shot in the Highlands just as well as they're shot over here in Wyandotte Park. Things happen. So it does but it also makes me feel embarrassed to tell people where I live sometimes because of that. So I haven't come back with a good response to that yet, besides being mad and being like, well, crime happens everywhere. No, I'm not afraid to live where I live. I love my little house. I usually joke and say I was tiny house living before it was a thing, but I don't have a good response to that one yet. And my other question before Lamont said it was how do we confront it when someone we're with, one of our friends we're with, and they say something like that, and maybe it is just hey, you need to think about what you're saying there, to a friend, or what did you mean by that? Or I don't know. Some of those are two things I'm not quite sure how to address myself with other people and where I live.
Good point.
You know, Mike, you may.
Lester, you got to unmute.
I'm
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Al. I saw Lester
Uh,
talking too.
Mike, one of the things that you may share is to help educate them and say, you know what, I've got the best of both worlds here. Here's the assets that I have in this neighborhood and whatever, and here's the location of it where I can get anywhere I want to in a few minutes. And, you know, let me tell you about my best neighbor friend, what they do, you know, just to, because it's a lot of it is unconscious comments that people are just trying to fit in, or in a meeting or whatever, and they'll throw something at you like that, and you just deal with it and try to make it educational for them, and, you know, treat them the way you want to be treated. And it could make you mad, but that's just, you know, just show them the confidence you have, and tell them why you live there and what's best about it.
You know, I like one of those responses that came out for that tip on 16 was one person, I think, just responded, ouch. And that's a strong response, even though it doesn't sound like it. It lets the person know, okay, you said something. And that way it just didn't get through. And so Mike, I think that's even a good start. That's a good start itself, and see how it works. I mean, the thing is to have the tools in the toolbox, you know, in your toolbox, and one may work one day, something else may work a different time. But then you also have to wonder, how does that affect, if a realtor asks you that question, how does that affect them being discriminatory and selling in the area? So just a couple of thoughts going along with what you said.
I do think one of the biggest challenges is how we address these problems with our friends, you know, particularly friends. You know, we all have different friends for different seasons of life, I guess is how I'll say it. You know, I have friends that I can address these sorts of things directly with, and they'll respond in a positive way. I have some friends that will not respond in a positive way if I address some of these things with them. And I'll tell you, the latter half aren't as good of friends as they used to be. You know, I often find that the best way to address it is to talk about how it made me feel. And if, you know, people change their behavior when they realize, to Lester's point about the ouch response, I do think people change their responses when you acknowledge that it wounded you in some way, you know, and people don't want to be hurtful to others, but too often we just sort of, you know, bandage over it and don't talk about how it made us feel. And I think it's important to acknowledge those things. I will say, to some of the points about aren't you scared to live there? Yeah, for those of you who haven't taken Fairhaven, I think Fairhaven did such a good job of putting some meat behind that concept. It certainly, you know, was educational for me. You know, I think if there's one thing that if I could get all of our members to take Fairhaven, I think we'd be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I agree. It pointed out, just to full circle in Habit 16, that your tone just has the big, I mean, you have to say what you have to say at that moment. I'm not really for sugarcoating it, but your tone, if it's welcoming and non and non-judgmental, you can still say what needs to be said without maybe making it so antagonistic. I can be a smart aleck, so sometimes Mike, really, can you be in situations like that? I find myself having quick comebacks and turning it back on the other people. But maybe if I could do that in a non-judgmental, welcoming way, like, oh, no, I'm not scared. Why would you ask that? You know, why would you think I'd be scared to live over there? Or, you know, make them say the thing that they don't realize they're saying, right? And so maybe that'll bring some awareness in their mental space as well.
One thing that I've noticed, like you said, with tone, along with that in 16, that meant the author mentioned about making a joke. You know, don't worry, we have diversity training in the fall. I've been licensed a long time, and I remember before the market went bad in 2008, there were certain realtors who would actually come to me because they wouldn't want to list or in certain parts of town, so they would want us to take care of those listings. And they would say that they didn't want to go to that part of town. Obviously, that changed afterwards. But one thing I learned was just to kind of, you know, make a joke about it. You know, look, the money still spends the same, but, you know, just make a light joke it'll get their attention, but it it does address the issue.
I was
Hey,
at an
Raquel,
event one time and sorry.
No,
No,
go
go
ahead,
ahead, Tanya.
Tanya. I've talked too much.
I was at an event a year or two ago. Well, it was before COVID, and the speaker was African American. After he spoke, we were all standing together talking. It was several of us, and someone came to him and said, "You were so well spoken," and he just, well, thank you. And I said, well, how is he supposed to speak? And then it was like the guy got it, and when he said that, and he was very apologetic, but so anyway, just to throw that out there. Usually I don't say anything, but he wasn't going to, so I did.
Active bystander. That's what you were. Good job, Tanya. Culturally effective.
Hope so. I'm working on it.
Anybody else?
I'll say that, and I shared on an earlier call that we listed a house about, we listed a house. It's an African-American couple, and he's a pastor. And I helped them buy the house, and now they're going to sell the house and move into Elizabethtown to a large church there. And they asked me, should we take the pictures down because we're Black? And I said, oh gosh, kind of took me off guard a little bit. So I asked Curtis Owens, one of our agents, and a couple others, and they have differing opinions. And so we list the house, and this is a nice house in a nice area. It's a $400,000 home. And we had about 25 showings the first 3 days and no offers. Well, we got one offer and then it fell through. Bottom line, it was on the market for 21 days. Now, is that a long time in this market?
Oh my gosh,
I know.
21 days.
It is crazy, yeah. So, but I started thinking, is that the reason? And we now have an accepted offer on it. And I don't know if the buyers are Black or white, but the agent is African American. So I don't know. I mean, I can't help but think that maybe, and again, this is stereotyping, the agent's clients may be African American, and maybe there was discrimination. Maybe there was some type of bias that these other buyers just decided they didn't want to, because they confronted me right up front. The seller, I think I told you that the wife called me up crying and said when they moved from Lexington, they couldn't sell their house. And that was the reason why, she felt like, it's because they were Black, and should we take all our stuff down? So I don't know. I mean, it was a learning lesson for me that was very kind of real time. And I still don't know. I don't know if I'll ever know the answer. So I don't know how to advise the next client. So anyway, that's all.
Yeah, that's a difficult point. There are a couple of cases actually going on now with appraisals that were done. I don't know if you've seen those in the news. I think one's on the East Coast, one's on the West Coast, where the owners of the home met the appraiser, and it ended up appraising lower than what they thought. So then they had a white friend meet the appraiser, because I think they were doing a refinance, and it appraised much higher. And then a similar thing happened on the West Coast. So there's some validity to it. I don't think it's right. I don't agree with it, but these are the times that we live in, unfortunately.
Well, there was a case just like that that I think's in maybe a legal case now in Indianapolis that just happened recently as well. So unfortunately, we still have things like this all in our industry, and that's why it's important for us to speak up when we see something that we think is not right. But Lamont, there's a question that comes, and I don't know if you got it or not, but a lot of times I'm working with African American sellers, and the question is, okay, Lester, do I need to take all my pictures down? And I don't know who else has gotten that question or not, but I don't tell people to take their things down. I said, you make a decision on your own, but it's your house. And if people don't appreciate you and your life and who you are. I'm not going to be the person to tell you to do that. And sometimes they choose to, and other times not. But that's something I don't know if they ask you that question in the process or not. So, but it ties directly into in a slightly different way. Are we seeing ourselves when we look look at someone? Are we looking in the mirror and seeing ourselves? And are we hoping to have many me's in all the things we do, even including when people buy and sell homes?
So I had another experience with one of our agents in Chip Crush. I see you on the call. It wasn't you. But one of my agents had multiple offers on a listing. And one of the higher offers, she said, and I'm telling on myself a little bit, but she said, look at the name of this buyer. And it was like a Middle Eastern name. It was real long. She said, I don't think that would be the one to go with. They always back out or something like that. And I said, and I actually, I didn't think about this now, but I did make that comment about the diversity, equity, and the DEI training. I said, ooh, looks like we need to have another DEI training. But in this person, as they always say, not a racist bone in her body, nicest person you'd ever want to meet. But she really is. But when she said it, I kind of called her out on it a little bit. But that was her reality. I guess that was her experience in the past. But that was just, a week ago.
I mean, it says something that we still have to ask that question. Do I keep my pictures up? I mean, part of it could, you could say, regardless of who your client is, you may, suggest that they, may want to remove their children's pictures or something like that, because you will have strangers coming through. But, more often than not, I get the question from a client who happens to not be white, and, asking, whether or not they should keep their pictures. And it just kind of tells you we still have a long way to go. And with regard to the names in our diversity class we had last week that Al referenced, she was saying that we really should not reveal the names of the buyers to the sellers, that it should be, we should do just like a spreadsheet that compares all the terms, and that's what the seller sees and not the actual names associated. And she said that is, certainly a good way to keep from being discriminatory.
Mm-hmm.
And typically I work in a smaller market where everybody knows everybody. And I tell everybody not to put their pictures up because you're trying to show the house and they start talking about, oh yeah, their kid did this. And then there'll be something negative that they know about that person. So I tell everybody just to not put your personal stuff on the walls or whatever, make it as neutral as possible. And I don't know if that's an option, to get away from that, but that is what I do, because I don't know how many times I've been sitting there and they just start going off on these conversations. We're not looking at the house. We're not moving forward with the process.
I think what Kim points out is, and Ivy touched on it as well, is this idea that, not all advice and not all comments are for all audiences, and you have to consider who you're saying it to, right? So to say we should depersonalize your home to a white couple will be interpreted differently than it might be interpreted from a black couple, even if that's the same advice you give to everybody. In the same way that in Tanya's example, walking up to a speaker after a presentation and saying, oh my gosh, you are so well spoken, or you're so articulate, to a white speaker reads a certain way. To an African-American speaker reads an entirely different way, and will have and so understanding the way that language is coded and how it's interpreted by the listener, I think requires a level of cultural awareness from us. That is, it's an awful high bar, right? I mean, it's challenging, but I think realtors are in such a unique position within our economy and within a trusted role that I really think it's incumbent upon our community to become culturally relevant or culturally aware enough to make those judgment calls and how we address these topics. Because saying I'm going to treat everybody the same, in theory, is great, right? But we really have to. I think Al's always great about talking about this. You treat people the way they want to be treated, or you try to give the advice that is right advice.
I'll interject something here.
Go ahead, Brenda.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Brenda.
Okay. I'm an accredited staging professional, so this is the way I handle this stuff. Because of the fact that I come, I have this accreditation or designation or whatever, and I've gone through several trainings on it. I always tell people, and it's just a blank thing that you can tell anybody that you've got, that you're considering listing their home, is remove all pictures that are related to families and things like that, because if a buyer can visualize their things in that home, then they're more apt to purchase it. Over there looking at all your pictures and oh, this must be their daughter's wedding or son's or whatever, and they're asking you questions about somebody's beautiful pictures of their family or whatever. And hobbies is the same thing. So if they can visualize their belongings in that house, it's more apt to sell. So that kind of does a blanket thing and takes care of it, And so if somebody asks you, should I take my family's pictures down? Then maybe you should say, well, hey, I recommend everybody do away with anything that really personalizes this home. And so,
and Brenda, I agree with you, but I also go back to what Justin said, because the real point is understanding why that's asked. And if you know that they're talking about not only family pictures, we might say that, and in some cases, yes, the answer is different. But if you know they're talking about taking not only that, but their artwork, so that it does not reflect that they're a couple or a person from a different culture, then they're asking it for a totally different reason. And in that case, I don't tell people to take their things down for that reason. I will tell them exactly what you said in other cases, simply because we think oftentimes in a diverse world that we're supposed to see everything alike. We're really not. We're supposed to appreciate the differences that we have and bring us all together from that standpoint. So just wanted to interject that.
I agree, Lester.
I understand that.
We'll let Mike go ahead.
I've got a question. So now I have a lot of buyers and sellers. They ask me about the other client, who's on the other side. They have kids. I'm like, I don't know anything about them. I don't ask any questions. I don't know anything about them. But now with Facebook and social media, they'll get their name off the contract and they look them up. They know more about who's buying their house or whose house they're buying from than I do. It's like, how do you deal with that? Usually it hasn't been in a negative light yet, but it could.
I don't know that you can deal with that, Mike. It's
right.
That is true. Hopefully it's after it's already on the contract.
Breach the contract. Don't breach the contract. Well, usually I tell people, I'm like, your earnest money. Now, if you get on Facebook and you see somebody and they like somebody, or there's something about them you don't like, or you don't like their face and you want to cancel the contract, you could lose your earnest money because you may breach the contract. But if it's something to do with legitimate thing that's in the contract, I said, then usually your earnest money is pretty safe. So I guess unbeknownst to me, maybe that's how I usually address that in the beginning.
Mike, one of the things I've done, and I'm not by any means an expert on all of this, but, multiple offers. I had a client who chose a middle of the road offer. And, I just was curious. And I said, how come? And the answer was, oh, my son came in and we were looking over the contracts and he said, oh, I went to school with that person. And the big thing for me was document why they did it. That way, you protect yourself. That's probably the only thing I would ever try to encourage folks to do is document. If you can find out why the seller chose something and document it for your notes, for your protection in the future. And I say it to all realtors. It's my broker, when I first got into business, beat in my head, document. And when you get done, document again. Because, if you say the same thing to everybody over and over and over again, you can protect yourself. It's when you're changing for each individual person. So you do need to know them, but if you're consistent in what you do, then, that's one of the challenges that we have to overcome. So, that's just
I think that continues to speak to, not letting the seller see names until, they've made a decision, and once they've made a decision, they can do whatever they want. But I did want to mention with Mike, with that one situation you were talking about, not only would they lose their earnest money, but they could be subject to being brought up on discrimination, charges with HUD. So, it's more than just losing your earnest money. You can't discriminate. Federal law says you cannot discriminate on those 9 classes.
I wonder what everyone's doing now with the love letters that people send that tell all the information about them. Are you all just not showing them, or what's everybody doing? Yeah, okay, no.
Well, in our class last week, she said, talk about the house, talk about, anything but, oh, this is a lovely family and they, their kids go to that school, don't say that, but talk about the house. What is it that they like about that house? And I've kind of tried to do that a little bit, just like, oh, that's just a beautiful house for my clients and, whatever. And I don't know, I got accepted on that one offer. I don't think it was because of my comments, but, I just wanted to let them know that they were very, very interested in the house.
Certainly no pictures attached.
Absolutely.
So if you're given the love, you have the seller and you're given a love letter from the buyer, you don't present that.
What they were telling us, no.
No.
No. And you know what the thing of it is, not only could we be in violation of fair housing law, but our clients could too. So, they might say, oh, I can just visualize all my children and grandchildren years to come coming down the stairway and seeing this beautiful Christmas tree on Christmas Day. And so basically, you just don't do that. And you can check it out with NAR. They say no.
And Brenda, going along with what you're saying, when we talk about the book, in particular, I think it talks about, that's the whole thing. It's us being culturally aware and being able to spread ourselves and open ourselves up a little bit so we can take more information in, so that we have better responses and better understanding of each other, and appreciate those differences and not just shut somebody down or shut something down because there is a difference there.
I agreed, Lester. And to bring it full circle with the book, that's the exact purpose of being culturally effective, like learning these habits. Because if you have expanded your circles, if you have friends with families that look different from yours and you're used to those spaces and you're comfortable in those spaces and you know people, and you've made that effort to know people that are different, if you go into Lamont's listing with the African-American couple that has African-American artwork still displayed, I agree with you guys on the personal photos, but we're talking about a little step past that, other things that might identify their culture or their race. And you can look at that house and you know that those people are like you. You could still see yourself in their home because you know that, their home is like your home. You have friends that also have African art in their house. So it doesn't become a thing for you. But if you're limiting yourself to people just like you with families like yours or not families like yours, then when you go into a space that's different, it feels different and it doesn't feel like home.
I'm going what you said about the photos again in the house. There is so much material out there that you can give a seller on how to, stage their house, and all of it says to remove any personal photos so that the buyer can see themselves in there. So having said that, I have people ask me all the time because I hand out that material, and they ask me if they should take it down, and I always say I leave that up to you. I sold my house and I didn't take it down. I will Photoshop photos out the personal photos that it's going to be on MLS just for protection. But but they will ask because you can Google it. Like if sellers wanting to sell their home, does how to sell their home or how to stage it, it'll say take personal photos down.
Anybody else? Well, you guys, I've really enjoyed this conversation. We'll maybe let Lamont be Elizabeth and wrap it up. But we appreciate everybody's input and just the fact, first of all, that you took some time to read, because who's got time really to do that? To read and to learn and to listen to the diverse viewpoints. This has just been such a blessing for me, so valuable to pay attention to my perspective and be careful and conscientious about those biases and things that I have, as well as to hear other sides and how we can handle those effectively. So, thank you guys.
Hey, Raquel.
Uh-huh.
Hey, if anyone, I don't know how we could do this, but reading the last chapter, if anyone was going to try to get more training or start a local focus group in their community or neighborhood or whatever, I don't know how Justin, maybe the CEOs can do something, but if they have any success stories or ways to do that or other training, be great if we could find out or to help guide us.
You mean the sponsorship versus mentorship?
Yeah, like the sponsorships or just even if you gathered 5 or 6 people to, I bought about 6 of these books and have given them to various friends to just kind of talk about. We don't have an organized effort like this, but it's just the more we learn and can educate others, just the better our circles get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you give those books out to your friends and colleagues that put their foot in their mouth too often?
Not a bad idea.
How many did you get, Lamont?
Lamont, I had the very similar situation that you did. I'm glad you spoke up first, but in the restaurant that I just caught myself saying, yes, ma'am, and that wasn't the right thing to say. Now I'm thinking just say, yes, thank you. I don't want to.
Check, please.
Can I ask a question, please, before we wrap up?
Yes, sir.
Lamont, you did ask me about that the picture thing, and I've been toiling with that for years and trying to figure it out. Is that something? And I just tell people basically, whatever you think is what we'll do, and because I really don't know, and so I guess, and I've been asked that question many times as a Black man. Should pictures be taken down? But I think the tables need to turn, and I need to ask the white folks, do you think we should take the pictures down? I think, you all should know better than I do. Should we take the
Brenda
pictures
said yes.
Carter likes that question, I can tell.
Well, I just said yes because that is, if I can get somebody to actually, and I don't care if it's white, Black, whether they're American Indian, it doesn't matter. If they will take those down, then I can get a buyer to actually look at that house and place once I know they're placing their furniture, their whatever in that home, I know if they can get a loan on this house, it's sold, people. You know that, you're realtors, you know that yourself. So if I've had people, I had a local dermatologist who, his mother was a realtor, and he had the Coca-Cola collections. It didn't matter if it was, whether it determines their race or not, or has anything to do with race. If they just get into looking at all that and thinking, oh, I'd love to have, my aunt's got one of these and all that stuff, then they're not looking at the house, people. So I say, yeah, let's get rid of personal collections. And it's not racist in saying that. It's just the fact that we know a house sells better if it's depersonalized.
But now, Brenda, I show a lot of houses and sell houses, and most of them I see have pictures in them, but they sell. But so,
They do, but if I think of one client I had down her stairway, it was pictures of her family from beginning to end. It took forever to sell that house. I'm serious. Because everybody, when they walked upstairs, they was looking at those pictures and checking out if they knew this and or that or whatever.
Was that this?
But
market,
I think the reality is that is a valid point. There are people that are racist out there that feel they don't want to live in a Black person's house. And if they see photos and it looks like African American art or different culture, not even African American, I think it's up to us to educate our clients. Doesn't matter, you're moving into that house, all of that's going to change. But I think that's a tough one. That's a tough question, but I believe it's a reality.
And going back to and keeping it with real estate, the most important thing that we can do is to continue to educate our clients. So, and that's whether they're buying or selling. And you can't put yourself in the position to be a party to something that's being done wrong. And so, yes, there are different answers in different situations, but you have to understand or try to understand the intent. And you may get it wrong, but the odds are you're probably not going to get it wrong on the intent and behind that.
The other thing is, what is the difference between educating our client to not look at that than educating our client you can't write a love letter to that seller? So I think that's some of our responsibility as well. You can't discriminate. We've got to have those conversations.
Carter, I want to get you in before we leave. We hadn't heard from Carter yet.
I've been chowing down. I'm so sorry. I'm hungry.
We didn't notice.
You didn't know. I tried to close the screen when I was really getting into the bone. So, that is a great question that I've been asked over the years. And I know it's not solely about these pictures and things like that. But I'll just be honest. I service all kind of clients, all nationalities, genders, races, whatever, right? And I only get asked that question about taking down our pictures from my Black clients. I'll tell you that straight up. And my white clients don't ask me that ever. It just doesn't come up. We talk about depersonalizing things, but it's never usually just about pictures. And when you start talking about education, we have to educate our agents too, because if we can educate our clients to say, hey, paint doesn't matter, flooring doesn't matter, their furniture is going to be gone, you can put yours, this, that, and the other, then why can't you say that about, pictures and things like that as well? I'm on the side that, if I don't think a house doesn't sell because it has too many personal pictures in it. I think it doesn't sell because of people's biases of what's in those pictures. And I'll just say that straight up. And yep, that's that. And but I think we can push past that. How many times have you told somebody, well, we can paint that room, don't worry about it. I mean, you tell somebody they can take a wall down. Why are we why are we letting the personal pictures be a thing? You know, my clients will tell you if they don't want my house because my picture's up here, then they miss out. So that's my point, you know, just looking at somebody else's point of view on that. So and I did like the question of, you know, asking Curtis's question, asking the white people, should we take them down? But thank you. This has been great, and I'm greatly appreciative of this group, by the way.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Carter.
good deal. But I want to be conscientious of everyone's time. Just if you have to go, we can hop off. I don't mind if you want to.
Yeah.
If we have any parting words, mainly if you guys could, we can announce the next one, the next book, and the next date. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks.
I think Raquel, if Lamont goes to Jen for a quick second before he shuts us down.
Okay.
Hi. I appreciate this conversation so much. I've been quiet today, but I really appreciate the different perspectives and thought process on what we've had the conversation about today. Our next session, if I am not mistaken, is going to be in person. Is that correct? At the state meeting in French Lick.
Yeah, that's right.
And it will be the beginning of the book Cast. And that is, I don't have the author's name in front of me. I apologize.
Wickerson.
Isabella Wickerson.
Thank you. Yes. So that one I think is going to be a really interesting conversation. And I have not done a super deep dive into that book yet, but I've gotten started on it, and I'll be kind of leading that beginning discussion. So I'm anxious to see everyone in person for that.
Absolutely.
Hey,
Thank you,
before we
Jen.
cut out, I want to do a quick advertisement. Next Monday at 9:00 p.m. Next Monday at 9:00 p.m. is the 100th anniversary of Greenville community and in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it's called, sometimes referred to as Black Wall Street. When we did Color of Law, I noticed that I thought there was an omission in the book. But I think everybody may want to tune in on that about Black Wall Street, to the story of Tulsa, Oklahoma, exactly 100 years ago, June the 1st, 1921. And there's a documentary on CNN at 9:00 on Monday. You all might not want to miss that. Some people are not aware of it, and some people are, but it's a history that we need to know about. It really pertains to what we talked about in our last book.
Thanks, Curtis.
Okay.
All right. So Raquel, Justin, thank you all for doing an awesome job and keeping this conversation going. And we appreciate you. And yeah, as Jen said, our next meeting will be in French Lick, Indiana, June 29th at 9 a.m. We're going to have a in-person discussion of Cast. So we look forward to that. And on behalf of Elizabeth Monarch, we appreciate everybody being here. And Lester, thank you for your leadership and all you've done. And Charles Hinckley, Mr. President, if you're still on, thank you for joining us today. And with that, we'll see you in French Lick, June 29th.
Right.
Happy birthday, Justin.
Happy birthday.
Thank you all.
See y'all. See y'all.